we have Zelda now.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously I could play this whole thing. I assume you watched this trailer. I watched
Yeah,
it.
I watched it.
Um, I think this was a good trailer. This was a very good trailer, actually. I thought it kind of showed everything that you would experience. It showed off Ganondorf and the design of Ganondorf. Talked a
Yep.
bit about the story. Got to see all these different visuals of the various areas. We got actually, I think, plenty of sneak preview at what looked like bosses for probably dungeons. Uh,
Yeah.
there was like one boss in particular. It looked like it came out of the wall or something. It was pretty cool. Yeah, this one. This one that just like comes out of a wall. This massive construct. That was kind of
Yep.
cool to see. I imagine that's a dungeon boss. There was a point where we got to see another boss, which was like a three-headed dragon. I imagine that like might be a like final boss of some kind. It was like this massive dragon. I wish I could find it. Um, it was somewhere. I'll find it. But anyway, I thought this was a really good trailer. Personally, I think they
Yeah,
showed off
this is.
everything they needed to.
Yeah, I agree. Other than the last the gameplay presentation that they did, a couple of weeks ago with Aonuma, until this one, pretty much all the Tears of the Kingdom trailers to me have been nothing burgers. This one was the first actual good trailer they've released, in my
Yeah,
opinion. Like,
I'm pretty sure this is the final boss. By the way, this is like a sneak peek of what
yeah,
is the final boss because
it might be.
it's like I think of it as like it's
Yeah,
Ganondorf in Ghidorah dragon form.
yeah, that
Uh,
actually looks like Ganon. Yeah, like Ganon heads on
yeah,
that dragon.
it looked cool. It was very cool looking. Like good stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
and confirmed on Twitter, Matt Mercer is playing Ganondorf. We all suspected it. We heard the voice I think in this trailer and the last one as well. We're like,
yep.
that sounds a lot like Mercer. And yes, he did confirm on Twitter that
Oh, he's playing
he is
Ganondorf.
playing Ganondorf in this game.
Yeah,
So
voice acting. It's crazy. It's crazy seeing a first party Nintendo game put voice
Nintendo,
acting in a game.
yeah, have voice acting. Well, a first party Nintendo game not named like Fire Emblem.
Yeah, Fire Emblem actually. We'll take Fire Emblem out of that. It's a stark, just a stark difference to see this and then Pokemon.
Pokemon. Yeah.
I always bring back Pokemon. Pokemon is going to be my de facto like, man, look at this Switch first party. Remember Pokemon? Like this game again, highlighting the last of this trailer. This game did just about everything I think it needed to. It showed that it is in fact a different, very different play. It's a different place you're in. You get all these unique visuals. Like this was a great visual, by the way.
Yeah.
This great hallway was great. It was a good visual. Um, just seeing all the different parts of the world and
Yeah.
experiencing it. In this like
There were
beginning
things,
sequence
as
was
you
great.
said, that looked like real bosses and dungeons. There's the part where it looked like a little like sand temple like rising out of the sand. I was like, okay, that looks like that could be a dungeon. Like,
Right.
okay, they could be bamboozling us, but like that looks like, a desert temple or something like that,
Yeah.
right? Like, and there are
Well,
parts where like, okay, this looks like this is a dungeon type area, which is something. Good dungeons and good bosses was like, I have a lot of little complaints with Breath of the Wild that bother me in that game and that make the game annoying to me, but the biggest problem with those games is the dungeon with that game is there's basically no good dungeons and no good bosses. The dungeons were there, but they weren't very good,
right.
and the bosses were dog shit.
The bosses
Basically.
were not very well designed, frankly. If this is a boss, like this kind of boss is like that. I'm like, yeah, this is what I want to see. Let's go, big golem boss coming in at the end of a dungeon. As you're about to complete it, you get this massive golem creature coming out of the wall, just ready to kick your ass.
Yeah.
This visual was like one of my favorite
Yeah,
parts.
that's really nice.
Then we
Yeah,
have
and bringing back Ganondorf is a good idea because, like, yes, the final boss in Breath of the Wild was Ganon, but Ganon in Breath of the Wild was like a not really a character. He was just kind of like a force of nature. It was just like this evil presence
Right.
that was there and it was taking over the world. It
Right.
wasn't really a character. And then you just go to the castle and you fight, you know, 2 or 3 forms of Ganon. I don't remember what it was,
Yeah.
but from what I remember, you don't really interact with Ganon at all. It's not
No.
really a character. It's just the pig beast, and you just kill it.
It's
and
like a
that's it.
construct
Like,
that is in like this big temple-ish area.
yeah,
I don't know what else to call it. And then once you defeat that, you get the pig boss, which was probably my least favorite boss in any game I've ever played. That was the worst boss I think I've ever played in any game. It was just like, wow, I'm not having fun. This sucks. This is an actual physical character that you can potentially interact with. That's more than just like, look, it's a ooze. You actually have Ganondorf. Looks great. Good job on the design.
looks awesome.
Looks great.
Got a great voice actor voicing him.
Like looks all of it. What they showed in this trailer was your best foot forward. This is what I wanted to see. Definitely shows this game as like something that could be an all-time potential great. Obviously, everybody's already crowning this game of the year because that's what people do, without even playing it. But there you go. That's how it works.
I mean,
this trailer made it so like, hey, like to me, this trailer is like you should buy this game, and to me, this trailer put it in such a way where it's like, oh yeah, this is a game I want for sure. This is a game I want for sure, even without knowing the context that Breath of the Wild was amazing. For many people, like,
I mean, I didn't. You know, we've talked about it. We didn't like Breath of the Wild.
Not as much as other people, obviously. Not as much as other people. We don't see it as the pinnacle of greatness because we're like, man, these bosses and dungeons are not very good. This was a really lackluster final boss. Like, what is that? This game looks like it's just from this trailer, getting the sense from this trailer that they looks like they fine-tuned all that. That Ganondorf dragon thing looked really crazy. Again, the golem looks like a boss in a dungeon. Like, all that to me is like, that's what I wanted to see out of bosses. Hopefully the mechanics will live up to it as well. But do you think shrines will be back? We didn't see a shrine.
I saw something in the trailer that did look like a shrine.
That looked like a shrine?
They weren't inside it, but they were it was like it was below them. I think it's pretty early on.
Okay.
In the trailer.
Is this, maybe this is it? Like he's going on an elevator?
Yeah, that's not what I was talking about, but yeah, that could be. Yeah, just play the trailer from the beginning actually. Or yeah, from there is fine.
Oh, from there,
just,
let me just
let it run.
So here he is falling. I'm like trying to piece together. Okay, is there?
I forgot how long this like falling segment.
Yeah, the falling segment was really long.
That was like 20 seconds.
Visuals look really nice again. Like, oh, what about this?
Yeah,
down
right
here?
there, right there when he's climbing the cliff. That down there.
Yeah,
that could be a shrine.
That could be.
That looks like a shrine. That looks like a shrine to me. And that's the image I was talking about that I saw in the trailer. Like, yeah, that looks like a shrine to me.
Yeah, looks pretty good. Visuals here look, I would say, good. This is good. I mean, it's Switch. I'm giving it Switch, slack, but it looks really good.
It looks good for a Switch game.
Exactly. It looks good for Switch. That's what I'm getting to. Unlike Pokemon, which is like
many games on Switch look good for a Switch game, like Xenoblade and Mario and the original Breath of the Wild, and then Pokemon just looks like dog shit.
Looks horrible. Pokemon looks terrible. It's terrible. No. It's not horrible. It's not terrible. It's worse than that. It's like going to a landfill and be like, my glorious temple. It's horrible. They've actually patched Pokemon a bit. The frame rate isn't as horrible when you go into towns and things like that, but it's still ugly. But yeah, I think this trailer's great.
The stark contrast between Pokemon and most other, like, especially first-party Nintendo games on the Switch, like Zelda, Mario, Xenoblade isn't first-party, it's like second-party. Like the level of like effort it looks like they put into making the game is just like it's such a stark
It's
contrast.
huge
It's
contrast.
painful.
You're just like, what the hell happened? This game looks like there was a lot put into the visuals, especially with the
Yeah.
environments. The environments, like even the little town that we saw early on, all of it looked great. I was like, yeah, this is great. All of this looks great. Like Ganon's design looks great. The bosses'
Yeah.
designs look cool. Um, this looks like it to me it looks like they patched up the complaints I had with the first game. We'll see obviously when it actually releases and you play it, but definitely
Yeah.
put your best foot forward. This gave me the impression like, okay, I should get this day one. Like this gave me that impression.
Yeah, I'll probably get it as well. I have, as I've said, I had a lot of other minor complaints with Breath of the Wild that really annoy me that I hope they change. Weapon durability being one of the biggest ones. I know weapon durability is still in there, but hopefully it's not as obtrusive and um I don't know. It seems like, you can combine your weapon with other things to like extend the durability, so that'll
Right.
probably help. Um so yeah, we'll see
Yeah.
about that. Um but yeah, I agree. This trailer did what it was supposed to do, which was like hype the crap out of the game and be like, okay, if I didn't want to buy this before, I probably want to buy
Right.
it now.
Exactly.
Um,
That's exactly how I
Also,
felt.
if you're gonna buy this digitally, make sure you have an SD card because this is 18 gigabytes,
Oh. Oh my. That is a
which the Switch only has like 32 by default. So if you don't have an SD card, you're gonna need one for this.
Jesus Christ.
So
Okay.
either get it physical or
Yeah,
have
get
an
it
SD card.
physical.
I have an SD card, but
I think you should get it physical then. That's good. Imagine that. Like, think about how crazy this is though. I just want to step back for a second. 18 gigabytes, which is not actually that big for a game we see nowadays. But on Switch, you put an 18 gigabyte game on Switch, and the Switch is now more than half capacity full.
yep.
If it was just
I
that's
mean,
fucking crazy to me.
there are other games that are close. I think the original Breath of the Wild was like 14 or something. Fire Emblem Three Houses was pretty big. It's like 13 or 14 as well. Pretty sure Xenoblade 3 was like 15 or 16, but this game is the biggest on Switch. So,
Isn't that crazy though? It's like 18. That's the biggest game on Switch. You look over to what was the game that we talked about? That was 150?
Jedi Survivor at
There it is.
155 on
10x.
PC.
Almost 10x. Like, fuck. Oh my god. That is so funny to me.
Graphical fidelity will do that real quick.
Yeah, it will. Yeah, it will. When you start to increase resolution, that file size gets real big. Anyway, I don't have much else to say. Like this was
It's a really good trailer.
this was a great trailer. They did a good job.
Yeah, they really did. They really built the hype for the game, and as we talked about, like, they better knock it out of the park with this because this game took 6 years to make, and the basic mechanics are the same as Breath of the Wild, but it seems like they've changed the world.
Mm-hmm.
They've added we talked about it, the fusing mechanic. Like, that must have just been an absolute freaking nightmare to program. So, yeah.
Yeah, getting that set up must have been crazy to make sure it was functional and working for every item. That was like a crazy amount of just general testing too. And I'm sure that testing actually produced fixes because that's like a main component of the game. So
yeah.
That's one of those things where like you gotta not just test it, but I think they did just focus on fixing those issues. That's like you focus that. But anyway, okay. We have Diablo 4 open beta retrospective transforming feedback into change. Those are some big words. We had okay. So I'm skipping the first paragraphs here because they're just talking about, early access open beta weekends, and then variety of fixes and updates are happening. Here's their
the only
dungeon
thing
section.
to mention is they said that these fixes will be implemented for launch,
which
basically. So
great. Ow! I just hurt my finger. Okay. So one of the most common pieces of feedback with dungeons, which is true, we had a big feedback on dungeons as well. Felt they were doing a lot of backtracking within certain dungeons. We've optimized multiple dungeons across all zones to minimize the need for backtracking. Here's a list of dungeons specifically in Fractured Peaks zone, which received layout changes. Healthy chunk of them. Primary goal with the layout change was to reduce certain kinds of backtracking, which detract from a player's experience. So this is just, they give an example of entering side rooms to interact with objectives, and then just they have to retread the path back, which is true. You're constantly you were going back and forth quite a bit.
Yep.
So let's see. Small numbers of struggling monsters will seek out the player to help complete the kill all monsters objective. So that's great. A good start. There are certain creatures that are really slow. Skeletons, for example.
That's true.
So it's not like they're gonna make their way back to the player fast, but it's a nice, at least, change starting point for sure.
I think people still want this to be like kill 95% of monsters and not kill all monsters, but
Right.
doesn't seem they're ready to make that change yet. But this helps. It's something.
Channel times. I'm highlighting these two, but I see another one. Channel times either are 0 or reduced by 50%. This one is just from 3 to 0, 3 to 1.5, 2 to 0. By the way, thank God.
Depositing the rock on the pedestal is now instantaneous and does not have a channel anymore.
Of course, because you're literally doing this. Why would I have to channel that?
Wasn't picking up the rock a channel as well? They didn't talk about that.
Oh, I don't know. They didn't say that. All structure objectives and dungeons now have additional combat mechanics players must overcome. I mean, there's definitely a lot of positive changes in here, as well as I guess what I'll say.
Yeah, no, these are all good. These are all good change. There's nothing in here that I'm like, this is a bad change.
Right.
These are all things that are trying to combat the feedback that dungeons were repetitive, tedious. There was a lot of backtracking. The objectives were annoying, etc., etc. It's not like they're reworking dungeons entirely, which is, I think, what some people might have wanted.
Right.
But as far as I'm concerned, these changes they're not groundbreaking, but they're quite good.
Yeah.
I think these will help substantially.
Agreed. Okay, we're going to classes now. Oh goody.
Oh goody.
General, effects like stun and freeze can be applied to elite monsters twice as long before they become unstoppable. Reviewed class skills to confirm that all classes have access to sufficient skills that remove control impairing effects. Legendary powers have had updates to their effectiveness. Okay, so here's Barbarian to start.
Let me just say real quick, that third bullet point on general, many legendary powers have had updates to their effectiveness. That is very vague, and that sounds like that's actually a lot of changes. They did a pass on every single legendary power in the game and are like, okay, do we like this? Do we want to buff it? Do we want to nerf it? Do we want to change it completely? That is super duper vague, and that one bullet point I think has a ton of changes within it.
It's possible. It's definitely possible that they looked at everything and made sweeping changes, minor and large, and they just didn't want to put all of them on here. I think that makes sense.
I mean, this was a very high level patch note. This wasn't this is like patch notes, but it's not, because they didn't do the detail.
Correct.
This is the general overview adjustment patch notes, as opposed to we changed it from 100 to 105 or whatever, those kinds of patch notes where they literally detail every single number of every single change that they did in the game.
Here's Barbarian. 10% passive damage reduction has been added. Some skill tree passives had their damage reduction effects reduced to compensate. This to me is a really big deal. We talked about this before.
And I think I think it's a very good change.
It's a very good change. Whirlwind skill now deals more damage and consumes more fury. Also good. I think there were a lot of complaints that Whirlwind did not feel that impactful. Double swing skill enhancement refunds its full fury cost when used on stunned or knocked down enemies. I didn't really use that one that much.
Yeah, I assume that before it refunded like a portion of the
Yeah, I
fury
think it was a
cost on
portion.
stun or knockdown, maybe half or three quarters. I don't remember,
I think it was a
but
portion.
now it's full. I do want to talk about the damage
Yeah,
reduction
go ahead, please.
bit. As we said, um, I think that's a good change for Barbarian, especially for the early game. I hope that I understand that they wanted to reduce some of the passives to compensate, but I hope that overall now if you get those passives that you have more damage reduction that you had before, and that if they didn't reduce those passives so much that you just have an equal amount of damage reduction, but some of it is just flat passive.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm hoping, like, for example, the Frenzy, one of the upgrades on it had you get 8% damage reduction per
Yep.
stack of Frenzy, which
Yep.
goes up to 3 stacks, so you got 24% damage reduction. So maybe they reduce that to like 6% per stack, so it goes up to 18%. So now with the 10%, you have 28% instead of before you just had 24%. So you have
Yeah.
4% more damage reduction with the flat
Yeah, that's probably what they'll
passive.
do. That's probably what
So
they'll do. I think if they reduced it any less than 6, it would become a it would become a nerf on some of those. But 6 feels appropriate. Going from 8 to 6 feels appropriate. If you started to go into, like, for example, 4, like 4 would then
well, if
actually
you make
make
it
it.
4, yeah, if you make it 4, then it's just a flat
It's
nerf.
just a flat nerf.
If you make it
So
5, then you only have a overall 1% increase in damage reduction. That doesn't feel impactful enough.
yeah,
Um, Even though, like, okay, in order to maintain that bonus, you have to maintain 3 stacks of frenzy, which you're not going to have all the time. So flat 10% damage reduction is just better.
it's
But
still good, right? It's
still,
still
what I'm saying is I want you to have overall more damage reduction than before, not
correct.
equal or less. That's
Right.
just like conditional.
Right.
So
You should get a little bit more. The barbarian needs it. I mean, they really do need it, particularly in the early, like, game against bosses. They just need it. Um. So
yeah,
yeah, I hope so.
good change for Barb.
Yeah.
Thank you, Blizzard.
Yeah. Barb needed that. Okay. Druid companion skills will now deal heavily increased damage. Okay. Ultimate skills have had their cooldowns reduced. Okay. Usability improvements have been made to maul and pulverize. Right. Using a non-shape-shifting skill will transform a druid back into their human form. I didn't
Okay.
play druid, so I didn't know.
Oh, you didn't play
I didn't
Druid.
play
Yeah.
druid, so this is like, for me. I'm like, I mean, all that sounds great.
Yeah,
So
these are buffs. I'm not. This doesn't sound like enough to me to make, because the druid was the weakest class in the game. I would have liked the druid to have some damage reduction like the barbarian did. Maybe not quite as much, maybe 5%.
yeah,
Um, but the druid's a melee class as well. For the majority, there are like some niche ranged builds, but you know, I think we'll see. We'll see if this is enough, and like maybe they're not giving us the full picture. Who knows? The ultimate cooldown reduction is good. They needed that
yeah,
because the druid ultimates, like the cataclysm, which is the one I used, which was the storm ultimate, had like a, I want to say it's like 70, or it was 70 to 80 seconds,
that's high.
whereas most other ultimates had like 60 seconds.
Yeah,
So the ultimates weren't as impactful. Companion skills dealing more damage. Okay, that's good. I don't really like the companion skills on druid, so I don't love that change personally. But yeah, the companion skills were quite weak, especially passively. The wolves did like 10 damage when they bit something or something. It was like completely negligible.
10 damage.
Yeah, when you just passively, when you use the active, it did more, obviously, but that has a cooldown.
Yeah,
Um,
like 10 damage.
so yeah. I'm also wondering, like, apparently, there were a bunch of companion legendary aspects. One that made companions do like 200 or 300% extra damage. I'm gonna assume they tone those down after this buff, because then that sounds like it's gonna be way
That
OP.
would sound
But
really
we'll see.
strong. Sure.
Um, Usability improvements to maul and pulverize. Sure, I mean that just sounds like they made the abilities like more responsive in some way, or just feel better to use. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Um,
hard to say.
and the fourth point, I figured you did that already, but I didn't. I used mostly a caster druid. I only used one shape shifting skill, so I was in human form most of the time, so I wouldn't have noticed that.
Okay.
Um,
I don't know if that makes sense. I mean, generally speaking, I think it makes sense, but just
yeah.
curious.
So we'll see. I don't know. The barbarian buff seemed more substantial, and I would have thought the druid need a little more help than the barbarian did.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We'll see how it feels in the
Yeah.
full game. But
Agreed.
druid did get it did get buffed, so we'll see.
Yep. Necromancer. Summoned minions will die more often,
Thank goodness.
requiring players to utilize corpses more often. Many bonuses in the Book of the Dead have had their stats increased. The damage dealt by the corpse explosion skill has been reduced. This is a very big deal.
It is a big deal.
I think I saw necromancers, particularly against the world boss, going with the corpse explosion build where they just threw corpses on the ground and blew them up. Corpse explosion, generally speaking, is just a very good skill. So, brightness of skeleton warriors and mages has been reduced. I did notice they were quite blue when I used them.
Shiny. They're quite shiny.
They're quite shiny, so makes sense.
Yeah, I didn't mind that personally, but there were people that complained about that, so
yeah,
they
it was like,
they
these are so bright. Makes sense. I mean, it's like kind of silly to see the corpses be so bright. Or the skeletons, excuse me. Those are correct to me. The minions were just too strong. So
they were too tanky, especially. They did a decent amount of damage, but I think mostly they were like too tanky, and on anything except like big, powerful bosses, they wouldn't die.
They wouldn't die,
like,
right? So that makes sense
never have
to me.
To worry about resummoning them. Like
bonuses for Book of the Dead having stats increases, I think, potentially to compensate for that a bit.
Yeah, and I think people complain that the Book of the Dead felt like not impactful enough as like the Necromancer class mechanic. It just didn't do enough. They just buff it. They just buff it.
It really didn't. I can vouch for that. It just did not. Corpse explosion makes sense. Brightness, sure, why not? Those changes make sense already. Yeah. I feel like those are the biggest complaints.
I'd say overall nerfs to the Necromancer, but I don't think it's a heavy. I guess it depends how squishy they make the skeletons.
Right.
If they're like super squishy now, then it might be a big nerf. But to me, this looks like a minor nerf to Necromancer, which they needed. Necromancer was overtuned in the beta, so
agreed.
Like corpse explosion as well. I think it was too powerful for something that basically costs no resource. I mean, obviously you need corpses to use it, but
against a mob, you generate one corpse and you kill the mob.
Oh yeah, I mean against as you said, mobs of enemies, it's easy to get corpses. Against bosses, it can be harder, but there were mechanics in the Necromancer to get corpses. So
you could generate
you could do it if you did a corpse build. You could do it pretty easily. And corpse explosion, I think, was too powerful.
Yeah.
The one thing I will mention is they made no mention of nerfing the Blood Mist infinite invincibility build that Necromancer had in the beta.
Oh god. They might not have talked about it here, but
maybe this was in that generic legendary aspect change, because that was it was an aspect where I'm pretty sure the aspect part of it was that Blood Mist detonated corpses and reduced the cooldown when you detonated corpses.
I see.
And there was one of the passives on Blood Mist made it like drop corpses when you were in Blood Mist, so you could just infinite Blood Mist and just go around corpse explosioning with Blood Mist.
That seems a little strong.
No, yeah, you could literally have infinite invincibility and just kill everything with Blood Mist corpse explosioning things. So I'm gonna assume that change. Obviously, reducing the damage of corpse explosion will help with that.
Yep.
But I'm gonna assume the big change is gonna be in they're changing the aspect in some way to make it so that it either doesn't reduce the cooldown or doesn't reduce it as much or something. Who knows?
Yeah, something like that. Okay. Yeah, that's definitely you definitely got to fix that. You can't have that. Makes things a bit trivial. Rogue. Upgrades for subterfuge skills have had their bonuses increased. Multiple passive skills have had their bonuses increased. All imbuement skills have had their cooldowns increased. These two are buffs. This is clearly a nerf.
Yep.
So I don't know, like, I didn't play Rogue either, so I don't know, like...
Yeah, imbuement skill, at least to me when I played Rogue, imbuements was really key to Rogues dealing damage, and especially having AoE, like Shadow Imbuement was the big thing where, like, you click that and you attack a mob and just everything explodes and dies, because Shadow Imbuement was like exploding palm from Diablo 3, where like when you hit an enemy with it, it made them explode when they die. So
Oh.
you basically, like, you activate Shadow Imbuement, you AoE the mob, and then all the enemies just explode and kill everything.
Wonderful.
And the Imbuements, I believe, had a 9-second cooldown in the beta, but it was a 9.5, between 9 and 10, I think.
Okay.
So, and they were pretty key to the rogues dealing damage. They're pretty key to the kit, so it's gonna depend how much they increase the cooldown. If they made it like 15, I think that's rough.
Yeah.
But if it's like, if they increased it by like 2-3 seconds, maybe it's like 12 now, I think that's okay. But
Okay.
again, if they make it like 15-20, I think that's rough for the rogue. So
Yeah.
that one really depends on the number, on how much they increase the cooldown.
Right.
So
Okay.
and the other things, you know, okay, they're a buff, but
Yeah.
again, we don't know what they changed or how much they changed it.
Right.
So it's too vague.
It sounds like a buff, but we'll see how much.
It is a buff because they're increasing numbers, but we just don't know how much they increased it, or what exactly they increased. It's too vague.
Yeah. Sorcerer. Charge bolts damage was increased, and the mana cost to cast has decreased.
So big buff to charge bolt.
Decreased the damage of chain lightning and reduced its effectiveness against bosses.
Mm-hmm.
Decreased the cooldown for the incinerate skills enchantment bonus. Firewalls will now spawn underneath enemies more frequently when using its enchantment bonus. Increase the lucky hit chance for the meteor skills enchantment bonus. Oh boy. I've noticed I see the electric based builds and I see fire builds.
Yeah, they didn't touch cold.
They didn't touch cold at all. Wasn't cold the better build?
Well, here's what I'll say. I think in general these changes are good. I mean, I used a fire build. So, but I know Ghost, he used Chain Lightning, and Chain Lightning was really powerful, so I think toning it down a little bit was probably right. We'll see. Hopefully they didn't tone it down too much and now it's crap, but we'll see.
Yep.
Charged bolts, I didn't see anybody use, but I assume it was underpowered because nobody was using it. As someone who used the fire build and used the both of these, I tried both of these enchantment bonuses, the firewall one and the meteor one. I tried the incinerate one a little bit too, and that one was just god awful. So I think originally the incinerate one spawned every like 20 seconds, which was way too infrequent. Again, they didn't say how long it is now, but I think it should be like 10. This is literally cut it in half.
Yeah.
But then also the other problem with the incinerate one is that they need, and I saw a video on this, is like that thing like to attack walls and boxes and not the enemies.
Wonderful.
So
wonderful.
That one needed a lot of work. And yeah, the firewall one was cool, but it just didn't happen. I think it was, I'm pretty sure the way it was worded in the beta was that there was a 5% chance every time an enemy takes burning damage that 2 firewalls spawn underneath that enemy for 3 seconds.
Okay.
And they would spawn in like a cross shape.
Yeah.
So the enemy would spawn like in the middle of the they would be in the middle of the cross shape. So when it happened, it was really powerful and did a lot of damage, but 5% is a very low chance. And there was, I don't know what it was. There's something weird going on with the RNG in this game. Because to me, the RNG feels really streaky in this game, both with legendary drops, basically with low percent chance things, especially
Yep.
with legendary drops and this firewall bonus. You would have points where like you wouldn't get a legendary for a long time, but if you got one legendary, you would get like 2, 3, 4 in a row. You would just get a bunch in a row.
Mhm.
And I had the same experience with this firewall enchantment where like I would have points where I would be attacking mobs and my whole build was based around burning damage. So I'm doing burning damage all the time. So you would think it would happen fairly often, but like I would have streaks where it wouldn't happen at all, and then I would fight a mob and it would happen like it would just go like foosh foosh foosh. It would happen like 3 times, and I'm like, what the hell is going on with this? Like I get it, it's probability and like that's the way it works sometimes, but that happened way more often for me than for me. Where I'm saying like, okay, the
Right.
RNG is messed up in this game. It doesn't work correctly, basically. Um, but yeah, I think increasing the chance of this from it was 5%. Again, we don't know how much they increased it. If they increased it too much, this would be super OP. If they made it like 25% or something, that would be
No,
insane.
maybe like 10.
But I think if you made it 10, it's okay.
Yeah, 10 seems okay.
I think 10's okay. Any
Yeah.
more than that, and then I think it gets a little too crazy. Um, and the lucky hit for Meteor, yeah, that needed a buff as well. That one was lucky hit 3% to spawn a meteor every time an enemy takes. I think it was also anytime an enemy takes burning damage.
Okay, I see. So really, you're just stacking the burn damage to get off these other skills.
Oh no! It's just lucky. It's just lucky hit 3% because lucky hit is a mechanic in and of itself. Every skill has a lucky hit chance when it deals damage.
See. Okay.
I don't know if you've looked into this, but it's not 3% because every skill has a lucky hit percentage. So if a skill has a 50% lucky hit, it's 50% of the time that thing lucky hits.
Yep.
But then the meteor says 3%. So 3% of 50%, you'll spawn a meteor. So that's 1.5%.
Yeah.
And most skills have 50% or less lucky hit chance. And there are ways in the skill tree and through affixes and stuff to increase your lucky hit chance.
Right.
But a meteor one was crap. I think this needed to be. I think that one should at least be doubled to 6%, if not bumped up to like 10%, like the firewall one, to be like reasonable.
Yeah, if you bump it to 10%, it just goes to 5%.
But 10% is really 5. Is really
it's
5%.
Really 5%. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable still. Like 5%. Like, yeah, come on, that's not too bad. I would think, depending on how it actually works in game. But like 5% doesn't sound too bad. But like if you're if you're able to get lucky hits all the time and just throwing out all the time, I can imagine like that 5% being more impactful than it seems.
Yeah.
It just depends on the situation.
Yeah, it depends how much lucky hit you're able to stack and how much.
Right.
But like, this is the build that I'm planning on going for, is like a fire build focusing on burning damage and those 2 enchantment effects,
Right.
like randomly spawning firewalls and randomly spawning meteors. I'm not sure if it's going to be good, but it just sounds cool and fun.
It just sounds very let's like slot machine. That's the sorcerer slot machine build.
It's the burning sorcerer slot machine build where I do burning damage out the wazoo and hope I spawn firewalls and meteors all over the place.
You just let it ride. Hey, you know what? You just let it ride. I love
it. So yeah, I'm glad those got a buff. They felt like I liked the firewall one. As I said, I think it was too inconsistent for me, but like it was good when it happened. So I think increasing the chance and looking at the RNG is good. The one thing I will mention about sorcerer that is not in here that I'm really surprised is Hydra. Hydra was OP as fuck, and they did not.
Hydra
touch
is not
apparently.
in here.
I
don't know. Maybe they're okay with it.
Maybe they adjusted the legendary aspect of it to make the legendary aspect not as good. The one where you could get 2 Hydras.
Yeah.
But the base damage of Hydra was still really, really high in my opinion.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit surprising. Hydra was pretty freaking OP.
They probably did that.
We'll see.
Let me just see if there's anything in UI that was impactful. some controller stuff. Character stats will be displayed by default when player. Oh, here we go. A character stats will be displayed by default when players click the materials and stats button within the inventory. You
Thank
complained
goodness.
about that before,
Well,
and I
yeah, it was
agree.
stupid.
It's stupid. So I'm glad that they fixed that. Let's see. The sans serif font used in game has been replaced with a new serif
Yeah,
font.
people complained about the font, so they changed the font.
That's so funny. That just like we've changed the font.
And a bunch of bugs about like keybinds and stuff. Like you couldn't bind mouse wheel, you couldn't bind like force move and interact to the same button or something like that. So
Here's something
they
interesting.
changed
I complained about this. Melee characters against bosses are bad. Bosses such as Tichort, Malnak, Vaynard, and others were reevaluated for melee character difficulty, resulting in changes to attacks, and fight mechanics. Good.
really, really good. Again, it's kind of a vague patch note, but like if they looked at this, if they did a pass on like every boss in the game and are like, hey, is this boss cancer to fight for melee? Let's change it.
Right.
Like, okay, you can have a boss every now and again that is like anti-melee, but for every anti-melee boss, there should also be an anti-range boss, right?
Correct.
There should like
You
you know
balance it
shouldn't
out.
be just like every boss is just like cancer for melee and easy peasy for
Exactly.
range.
I
Like,
agree. Like that was my main complaint. So I'm glad that that's being reviewed. I want to talk about sellers. Actually, I ignored every seller I came across because I thought they were stupid. So
I did them at the beginning and then I stopped doing them
Yeah,
because they were
because
pointless.
they're fucking stupid. Increase the chance for a dungeon event to occur in sellers. Great. Sellers will now consistently reward a chest upon completion, therefore making them worth going in.
Yep.
So I'm skipping over some of this stuff, like where there's like a guarantee where the guaranteed elite monster would be absent from the seller, blah blah blah. So here's some
Yeah,
general quality of life
that was a
after
bug. But like, yeah, just real quick on sellers, like, so now when you go into a cellar, there is a guaranteed elite monster because they fixed that bug. They fixed
Correct.
that bug.
Yep.
And there's a guaranteed treasure chest. So that means you're guaranteed to like, you're gonna get some loot from the elite and you're gonna get some loot from the treasure chest.
Yeah,
So
great.
it could be a good thing to farm. Like, I don't think you could continuously like recycle them because I don't
No.
think they reset if you like go in and out.
Yep.
But it would be useful. Go into the cellar, you do a quick fight with like a mob and an elite, get
Correct.
a treasure chest, and leave.
Yeah, that's exactly what it should be.
And you can get dungeon events like cursed chests or cursed shrines or treasure goblins. Apparently, that's considered a dungeon event, so you could get a treasure goblin spawn in a cellar. So like. Yeah, I agree. I think this is good. This makes sellers worth going into now. Because in the beta, they were not worth going into.
Yeah, I just skipped them. It's like, well, what the fuck is this? Like, there's nothing in here. In some cases, there was just nothing in there, and it was probably the bug. I was like, okay, well, what the fuck did I just do that
there was
for?
There was like three like basic monsters, and like that was it.
Yeah, I was like,
okay, I got nothing out of that.
Okay. General quality of life. I'm gonna skip some of these ones. Reset dungeon button has been disabled.
Yep, that's the big one.
So let me see.
They added a fairly lengthy dev note about it too, because people were complaining about this.
We also wanted to. I'm just reading the piece of the note on that. We also wanted to make sure that resetting the dungeon wasn't a way for hardcore players to avoid death when experiencing a challenge in a dungeon. So there seems like they're looking for a permanent solution to it. But yeah, I mean, reset dungeon being an out, they've just removed that option.
Yeah, I think there became, and this was maybe just like a beta problem as opposed to what's going to be like a full release problem because you were locked at level 25.
Yep.
But I know there was meta amongst some grinders basically that there were certain dungeons that were just really fruitful where you would go in, there was like an elite pack or a couple of elite packs that were very commonly spawned pretty close to the entrance. You would just clear those out and then reset the dungeon and just farm. You wouldn't
without
complete
finishing
the dungeon.
It. Yeah,
you would just go in.
Yeah, of
I mean,
course.
I wouldn't mind if like reset dungeon, like there wasn't a button for it, but if you cleared out the dungeon then and left, then it would reset. I think that's fine. They want you to actually clear out the dungeon. But
Right.
I don't know. It seems like that they, yeah, I don't know. We'll see what they
I
do in the long run. But I don't mind this change at all. I never use the reset dungeon button personally.
I don't
but I'm
mind
not
it
a,
either.
I'm not a grinder. I'm not a grinder like that. I don't care.
I think they're just trying to remove a potential exploit that
Yeah.
would cause people to not play the game
not
and
explore the world, which is what they want them to do.
It's
Yeah.
like, okay, but if people know this, they're not going to explore the world. They're just going to power level and power, grind out loot.
Power
Here.
farm. Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyway, okay. So then they just talked about tuning into the live stream, and then that's it. There was something at the bottom that's like fixed an issue that caused Gale Valley and Sarek Rapture to have less monsters than intended until the campaign quest in those territories was completed. But other than that, I do appreciate that they're making changes that seem like good changes based on the feedback they got. Trying to improve the experience for the classes that might have had a struggle, particularly melee. But just generally trying to make the classes that needed help, give them that help. And make sure that the classes that were definitely exceedingly powerful in certain areas that they just shouldn't have been. Like, again, the Necromancer Skeletons should not be the tankiest characters. They should not be tanky, frankly. Unless you specifically pick a skeleton type that's like tanky but does very little damage. Kind of thing. Like kind of mentality. But
yeah, there was the defender. There was defender skeletons.
The basic skeletons were unkillable. And I was like, okay, this is stupid. These things are unkillable. They just soak up all the damage. I'm just gonna sit here and do all this stuff from the back line. I'll never have to summon them. So I appreciate them addressing that, and I appreciate them addressing the sorcerer skills and enhancements that needed it. Quality of life and UI, improvements are great. Sellers, this all sounds great. So to me, this is good. It makes me excited for June, and being able to jump into the game in early June. So that's all I have to say here.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in my opinion, there's not a change in here that was bad. Yep. There's a few changes that I feel like that they missed out on, or at least didn't address or didn't mention in these patch notes. Like I mentioned, especially in the class balance side of things, Druid, I think, could use more help than they mentioned. But maybe they, if they tweak the number, I'm sure they're tweaking the numbers everywhere, and they probably just didn't mention that. So, they tweak the numbers on Druid, maybe that'll help. And as I mentioned with Hydra and Sorcerer, like Hydra was super OP, so I'm surprised they didn't mention that specifically, but we'll see. Maybe they tweak the numbers on that one as well.
We'll see. I mean, we'll see. I'm sure during the live stream they might discuss it even further, and provide additional details. But yeah, I'm excited. Even with like Barbarian, even though that class was definitely not on the stronger end, at least when you didn't spec out completely, or like have like the perfect build like some people were doing. Barbarian was still fun to play. It was still fun.
I agree. It was fun.
It's just there was some frustration, and like
the boss changes as well should be big.
Oh, thank God! Thank God. Some of those bosses are a pain in the ass to fight as a melee character when they're just shooting out range attacks right in your face. And he's like, okay, like, what the frick? I'm just taking all this damage.
Or their auto attacks just do so much damage, and like you get close to them and they just swipe you for like 30% of your life. It's like, okay, cool.
I'm just like, okay, well, I'm just getting my ass handed to me. Better reduce all this damage with my skills and enhancements. It was like, okay, well, like the bleed for Barbarian was still fun. I enjoyed it and everything. It's just like, it was just so funny being like, man, like, I'm getting my ass handed to me, and then playing Necromancer and being like, well, this is easy. This is great.
Yep. Skeletons, go!
It was like, skeletons, you soak all the damage, and I'm just going to fire bone spears from the back line. All great. So I'm excited. Diablo is getting me more and more excited as I get into it. My initial impression was I wasn't interested really at all, and early access and open beta was great. So, yeah, I'm excited. Looking forward to it.
I agree. great, great changes. Seems like they're listening. I did hear the devil's advocate argument was like, well, this seems really fast for them to make these changes. Did they actually have most of these changes in the pipeline already, and they're just acting like they're like taking feedback and changing things?
No,
That's
they
a
didn't.
that's a very like devil's advocate argument that I'm not gonna
I don't buy
subscribe
it.
to, but I don't
I
buy it either.
I don't buy it. There's
And
plenty of stuff in here that people complain like, come on, give me a break. Like, okay, let's take font out of this font, aside for a second.
Yeah.
There's clearly some stuff in here that they really probably didn't even think about unless they got some feedback on.
Yeah,
Like,
I think the dungeons stuff especially, were like,
dungeons.
you need players to test your game and say like, hey, these are kind of tedious, they're kind of boring, like we don't really like this. There's
Right.
too much backtracking.
Dungeons. I think sellers was also something
Yes,
that they
sellers
probably
too.
didn't think about in more detail. You could argue that some of these class changes, I do think some of the necromancer things, like summon minions don't die fast enough, that might not have been in the pipeline, because you want, like, there are certain things in here that you need the players to look at, particularly like with things like UI and encounters. Like, come on, you got to get more players in there to know these melee characters are really having a hard time.
These fight mechanics are rough for
These
melee.
are rough for melee, and we're hearing it loud and clear.
I agree. I'm gonna give Blizzard the benefit of the doubt on this one and say that they did actually listen to the feedback and made the majority of these changes because of the feedback they got from the beta.
I'm sure there's some where they're like, yeah, we kind of knew that going in. Sure, they could have. That, you can't disprove that, I suppose. But to say like all these, no, there's no chance. Like, come on. Okay, even reset dungeon. That change was specifically from players. They knew that players were resetting the dungeon to use that. They knew that from
they got the data that, like, okay, players are just like farming like the first 10% of this like one dungeon and just resetting it over and over again.
Exactly.
To just farm.
They figured that out from players playing the game.
And they're like, yeah, we don't want people to play the game that way, so we're gonna take that away.
Exactly.
So
that's why, like, some of that stuff they definitely saw through data. But yeah, I'm excited. June's gonna be exciting.
Same.
May's gonna be exciting. All good stuff.
Gaming wise, I'm very much looking forward to the next couple of months. As I said, Advance Wars is coming out on Friday. Age of Wonders comes out in a couple of weeks.
Right.
Breath of the Wild comes out like a week and a half after that.
Correct.
And then Diablo in June.
Yeah.
So
it's exciting.
Yeah.
Definitely exciting. Okay, we got one more thing here.